In this video, we're going to look at how to solve a polynomial by factoring. And when I refer to a polynomial, in this case, I'm actually referring to polynomials of degree 2 or more. So the highest exponent, I want it to be 2 or more. So a quadratic or something even more complex. So let's look at an example. In my example, we have x squared equal x plus 30. Now, you may recall from a previous lesson that the highest exponent is called the degree. So in this case, the degree is 2, which means that this is a quadratic. All right. When we see a quadratic, it's always advised to try to factor to solve it. So here we go. The first step I would like you to take in any quadratic or a polynomial that's similar is to make it equal to 0. So step 1, make our equation equal to 0. All right, how do we do that? All right, cool. Exactly, we have to subtract x from that side so it goes away, and subtract 30 from that side so it goes away. But of course, whatever you do to one side, you already know, you have to do to the other side. So we get that x squared is, minus x minus 30 is equal to 0. So that's step 1. Step 2, we just went over in a previous lesson how to do step 2. Step 2, we need to factor. Now, if you cannot factor the equation or the expression on the left side, that means it's probably not factorable, and that means that you may have to find an alternative way to solve the problem, and that's totally okay. But if it is factorable, you want to try to factor it. So we're going to look for two numbers that multiply to get negative 30 and add to get negative 1. So two numbers that multiply to get negative 30 and add to get negative 1. And my numbers are negative 6 and 5. Negative 6 and positive 5. All right, and of course we separate our x squared and we get x and x. Okay, so now our final step is to solve each part of our equation. And what do I mean by this? Let's write down the step. Okay, so step 3, solve each part. And you can write that all out if you like. All right, so what do I mean by this? Well, we have two numbers being multiplied, or two expressions being multiplied. This expression is being multiplied by this expression, and our answer is 0. Again, this expression, x minus 6, is being multiplied by this expression, x plus 5, and our answer is 0. How can you ever get an answer of 0 if you're multiplying two expressions or two numbers? If you said that one of the expressions have to be 0, you are correct. The only way to get an answer of 0 is if at least one of these expressions is equal to 0, which means that either x minus 6 is equal to 0 or x plus 5 is equal to 0. So now we can solve each side, each part of that statement. So we already know how to solve a linear equation. We add 6 to both sides, and we get that x is equal to 6, and that's one of our solutions. And quadratics usually have 1, 2, or no solutions, but in this case it has 2 solutions. All right, or, so we solve this side, subtract 5 here, and subtract 5 there, and we get that x is equal to negative 5. So here we have our two solutions. X is 6 or x is negative 5. So that's one example. Let's try another. Okay, so I have a harder example here because I really want to show you that this can work for polynomials other than quadratics. And so if you take a look here, you'll notice that we have an exponent of 3. So this is no longer a quadratic. It's actually called a cubic equation because our highest degree is 3. And we're going to solve it in the same way. All right. So, if you notice that on the right side here, we have something funky going on, but that's okay because we already know how to deal with that. All right, so again, if you recall what our first step was from our previous question, we want everything over on the left side. But before we can get everything over on the left side, we want it to look kind of like how the question before looked. So in order to get that to happen, we first have to distribute. So we're going to distribute this here, and we get the left side the same, 3x to the third, equal 4x times 2x gives us 8x squared, and 4x times negative 1 gives us minus 4x. Alright, so now that we've prepped our equation, we can start with step 1. And that's to get everything over to one side, make it equal to 0. So we're going to subtract 8x squared, and we're going to add 4x. We're doing the opposite so that we can get it away from that side. And whatever we do to the right, we have to do to the left. So we have 8x squared, we're subtracting, plus 4x. And we get, on the left, 3x to the third minus 8x squared plus 4x equal 0. Okay, so you may recall that you always, always, always have to look for something special. What is that something? If you said the common factor, you are correct. So there is something that can go into all three terms. What is that thing? All right, good. It's x. So that is step 2. We're factoring. So I'll just say step 2, and step 2 is factoring. All right, so we're taking the x out. Now we have to divide everything by x that's in and put it in these parentheses. So 3x to the third divided by x gives us 3x squared. Again, 8x squared, negative 8x squared divided by x gives us minus 8x. And we have 4x divided by x, and that gives us plus 4. Parenthesis equal 0. Okay, so we've factored, but it's not finished because we have this wonderful 3x here, 3x squared here, and it's not a common factor, so we can't take it out. So we actually have to either do trial and error or diamond box method of factoring. If you're not sure how to do either one of those, look back at my video for diamond box and you will totally love it. Okay, but for now, I'm going to do trial and error. Okay, so we have x here that stays there, and we're going to separate the 3x squared. So the only way we can separate that is having 3x over here and x over here. Now we have a positive 4, and how can we break up positive 4? Well, the combinations are 4 and 1, 1 and 4, negative 4 and 1, negative 1, negative 1 and negative 4. So they have to both be positive or both be negative, but that's not the only combinations we have. Two other numbers that multiply to get 4, 2 and 2, negative 2 and negative 2. So if you're not great at factoring, that's totally okay. That's why I listed these possibilities here. These are the different possibilities of numbers that can multiply to get 4, which is what we're looking for. So if you're not great at factoring, you would want to do what I just did and list out all the factors of 4. If you are pretty good, you probably could guess that you could get rid of these right away because that's negative. All right, so I would like us to try negative 2 and negative 2. And if you try negative 2 and negative 2 by foiling first, outer, inner, last, you'll actually realize that is correct. If what I'm not saying is not making sense to you, you definitely should look back at my factoring video. All right, great. So now that is step 2 all done, we have factored. Step 3 and the final step is to solve each part. And now recall that you have numbers being multiplied, in this case 3 numbers. We have an x being multiplied by 3x minus 2, which is being multiplied by x minus 2. So we have 3 things being multiplied. And the only way to get an answer of 0 is if at least one of these 3 things is equal to 0. And so we have 3 solutions. Either x is equal to 0, that's the first thing, or 3x minus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So I'll put that or here. And now we can solve each one of these 3. Well, this one is already solved. It's x is equal to 0. And here we can add 2 to both sides. And we get that 3x is equal to 2. Then divide both sides by 3. And we get that x is equal to 2/3. That's one of our solutions. Or final one, we can add 2 to both sides to isolate that x, and we get that x is equal to 2. So now we have our 3 solutions. Either x is equal to 0, or x is equal to 2/3, or x is equal to 2. And we're done.